You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. So good to be with you here today. The Recovered Life community has been really focusing on co-occurring disorders in addiction recovery. And I'm so thrilled to bring on my next guest. And it's a familiar face. We've had her on before, Kennedy McGurkin from Returning to Self in Boise, Idaho. She's a therapist. And we're going to dive into this idea of BPD. What is BPD? How does this interact with addiction? And what do you do if you think you might have it, if you think you might be affected by it, or you have someone in your life that has a co-occurring disorder? They're fighting addiction and they're also dealing with BPD. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Kennedy McGurkin. How you doing, Kennedy?
Good. How are you, Damon?
Oh, I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for coming on today on the Recovered Life Show. It's good to see you. And you're in Boise, Idaho. You're a therapist and BPD. I got to tell you, not many people want to talk about this in addiction recovery.
No.
Not many people want to.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
I think BPD is a lot of people don't know BPD to its extent because they're still coming out with a lot of research about it. We're still learning a lot about the diagnosis itself. At first, it was just a woman's diagnosis. Now we're realizing women and men can both struggle with BPD, and there is a lot of unknowns about this specific diagnosis. And I think that's what makes the stigma so big, but also it's scary, right? Because we don't know a lot about it. Like if it was anxiety or depression, we've been studying that for years, where BPD is now just kind of getting the stage that it deserves. And I think coming on these podcasts or talking about it can really help kind of deconstruct the stigma against it and really spread knowledge about what it actually is and how to help, right?
Exactly. Now, a lot of people, when I first heard BPD, I thinking, oh, bipolar, but it's not bipolar. It's called borderline personality disorder. Can you talk about exactly what is borderline personality disorder?
Yeah. So BPD is basically the fear of abandonment, or there's a lot of factors that go into BPD. One of them is being very extreme emotions. So for example, where someone who doesn't have BPD might feel sadness, someone who feels BPD, someone who has BPD feels sad. They will feel rage. They'll feel these very big, huge emotions, and they'll feel very alone in those emotions. Disconnecting from self, depersonalization, derealization, self-harm is a huge part of BPD, suicidal ideation. The number one thing is really just the fear of abandonment, and then actively avoiding and choosing things to avoid that abandonment.
Can we talk a little bit about this sense of abandonment? Because this was confusing to me when I first heard this. And I think no one wants to be abandoned. No one wants to have the fear of abandonment, right? That's a human condition.
Right.
But it's not really with people that have borderline personality disorder. It's not that they just fear that they're going to be, it drives them, right? Everything they do is based on not being abandoned. Is that correct?
Correct. That's something that I talk a lot to my clients about, is the fear of abandonment and the extent of what that means to someone with BPD. I had a client describe it to me in a way that I will never forget. They said they felt like their whole entire life, if you picture like in those end of the world movies, right? They have like a crack that goes down the middle of a city, and they're here and their loved ones and everyone else is over here, and they are alone in their journey. They're alone in their thoughts. They feel a deep sense of loneliness, and that does drive a lot of their actions, the way they behave. That's why DBT is like the number one therapy used to treat BPD, is because it's a lot of relearning behaviors and relearning thought problems in order to retrain your brain that you are not alone. And just because you had an experience or a really bad childhood or whatever it was that kind of inflamed the BPD, you're kind of just retraining yourself to be like, this is not real. This is not how I want to continue to live. And this is what I'm going to do to fix that.
I first saw this, and I think that this idea that you're saying that it was primarily diagnosed to women, right?
Mhm.
That would have BPD.
Correct.
And I first saw this in 12-step groups where I would see people come into 12-step groups and they would have a harder time. We were talking about controlling our emotions.
Mm,
We were talking about just basic things, right?
yeah.
And you would see people come in and you would see them struggle with that. Everybody struggles with, looking at being the observer. This is my emotions. And do I have to react? I would see that there were certain people that
Hmm.
had a lot of drama. There was
Hmm.
a lot of flying monkeys around. There
Yes.
was a lot of they were like trapped in it, and no
Yes.
matter what happened, right? And you would see them go in and out
Yes.
because what I learned is alcohol is one of the symptoms of alcohol and drugs is one of the symptoms of BPD that people will overuse them to self-medicate. And
Yeah.
I
And
would see this
self-harm.
going back and forth. Can we talk about the emotional state here? Because I think it's very challenging because when we're saying don't listen to the alcoholic thinking, like when I'm doing TikTok lives or coaching somebody, I'm like, don't listen to the alcoholic thinking. Let's watch it. People
Mm,
with BPD, I noticed when I worked with them, they have a very hard time
right.
separating what they're looking at
Yes.
and reality, right? Like it's even tougher for them.
Totally. Yeah. I think too, when we say like, don't, it would be like telling a kid, like, stop screaming, like, stop throwing the temper tantrum. It's not a big deal. To the kid, it's a huge deal, right? To someone with BPD, that emotion is so big in such a wave that feels huge. Like, this is not, I'm sad, I'm going to drink. It's, I am devastated. This is the end of my world. I'm going to drink. Or we see the rebound of it, right? Of, I'm the happiest I've ever been. I'm doing the best. Like, I'm amazing. I'm doing things. And then something triggers it. And then we start seeing alcohol use to self medicate, like you said, or that is a form of self harm for someone with BPD a lot of the time, is choosing drugs and alcohol to self harm themselves. It's not just cutting, or it's not just, suicide attempts. There are choosing the wrong partners, having really reckless sex, and not choosing to protect yourself. Or, that's a very big thing, is the emotions are, if you feel sadness as someone without BPD, picture it times a million. And that is with someone who lives with BPD every day. That is the roller coaster they're on, right? It's not a normal, I hate saying that word, but a normal experience. It is a huge, it's like under a magnifying glass.
Yeah, and can we talk about men a little bit too?
Yeah.
Because I think this is stereotyped to women, and I know
Totally.
it appears differently with men
Hmm.
sometimes than it does women. Can we talk about that too? Like, can men have BPD,
Yes.
and what does that look like in men that differs from women?
It looks very similar, honestly. Like, once you know the BPD diagnosis, it presents very similarly in men versus women. Women in our society just get this, we are emotional beings. We are, we're labeled as all these things, where when men are, it's kind of, they're otherized, or it doesn't really make sense. Like, for example, a male with BPD might be diagnosed with anger issues when really it's a BPD diagnosis, right? Because the rage and the deep anger they're feeling is kind of that, like, deep emotional feeling that I've been talking about. And also the fear of abandonment, right? If that fear of abandonment or that feel of otherization or loneliness is so big and controls their life, that again would be more towards the BPD scale. And like I said, even to this day, it's really sometimes tough for men to get that diagnosis, because in our society, it's very women based, but men can have it. I've seen men in my office have it. We work on the same things in DBT skills. It's the same thing that we need to work on. It's just harder to catch because men are labeled differently than women. when it comes
Yes.
to those things.
And the interesting thing about this is I was just thinking about this Kennedy, when you were talking about this, I was thinking, okay, this is even more of a challenge for
Yes,
people with BPD trying to get sober because
totally.
we talk about community
Mm,
being one of the first steps after you surrender. After
totally.
you say, I'm willing, I'm going to surrender, I'm going to try a different way. We lean in on faith. We talk about this a lot, right? And now you have to plug into a community. And it's funny that you said this with anger
Mm-hmm.
with men, because I have seen it in addiction recovery is as they start to have a relationship with another guy who will
Mm,
tell them the truth and help them, they're all of a sudden will have rage and anger if
absolutely.
they feel at all slighted or they're gonna be cut out of the group or what, and it's not even going on. It's just you might have sat in a different chair because somebody's in the right? And
Yeah.
you could see there's a huge emotional
Mhm.
turmoil going on, and I think you're right. Guys express it a lot in anger and
Totally.
frustration and acting out because it's probably just more socially accepted that they would do that.
Right. Yeah, and I think too, I always say this too. I work with a variety of age groups, but I always say it to no matter who comes in my office, right? Like anger is a tree. We see the tree, we don't see the roots. So what's under the roots of rage and anger for a male who is struggling with BPD? Is it sadness? Is it the fear of abandonment? Is it I've never been loved? Like what are the core beliefs that are sitting on those roots of the tree too? Like I will never get over this, or I'll never be accepted. Or like you said, you just made something click for me too, right? In recovery, community is number one. If you are constantly feeling isolated, regardless of if you're using or not, that's going to be another burden, or not burden, but barrier that you have to go through in order to stay sober and to live a sober life, right? So I totally think I agree with you on that. And I think that's a beautiful point that you just made that I haven't really put together. So I love that.
It's what is so interesting about this is I look back
Mhm.
over just either service work,
Right.
community now, like we're talking, or coaching
Mm,
people and helping them transition into a sober life.
right.
And now starting to say, wait a second, maybe they were doing the work, but
Yeah.
the communication needed to be different with them.
Yes.
There maybe needed to be more like the people that are around people who are suffering from BPD, the communication needs to
Totally.
be better. And almost kind of what I'm hearing is kind of more clarifying that they're not being abandoned. Is
Yes.
that the case, that they are safe where they're
Yes.
at? And
Yep.
that very clear communicator about what you are communicating to them.
Yes. 100%. That's what I was going to recommend too when you are surrounded by someone like a loved one who has BPD and you are on the other side of it where you don't have BPD but you love someone who does. Like communication is key. They need a reassurance of you're safe, I love you, I'm here. I need to take a step back when you're heightened, right? Or whatever. And I think too what you brought up is sobriety looks different for everyone, right? Throw in a mental health diagnosis on top of that. Holy smokes, your journey looks way different from someone who might be struggling without BPD, right? And I think being trained and being knowledgeable about these topics, that can really help someone stay sober for a long time, or that can really help them, that can hurt them, right? Of feeling otherized, feeling like I can't do this, I'm misunderstood, et cetera, et cetera. So that totally changes the trajectory of someone's sobriety experience if they don't know, right?
I
That's like,
you know, I think it's important to know, and I think, if you do service work or you work in a community, a lot of the times we just write people off
mm,
as being difficult or not getting it,
yeah,
right? And I've been I'm gonna be honest, I've been that person. I'm like, "Oh, this is just too difficult."
yes,
Like, this is a lot of heavy lifting
yeah, yeah,
to be right? It's a lot of heavy lifting. I wanna get okay, Kenny, when we come back, I wanna dive into the solution because some people here might be saying, "Man, this is me. I have
mm,
the this is me," or they know it's them. They've been diagnosed with BPD, and I
yeah.
wanna get into the solution. Can you recover from BPD? Can you have a normal life? Are you gonna be able to stay sober and deal with your emotions? So when we come back, We're going to dive into that. We'll be back, guys, after this really quick break.
Recovery isn't just a journey, it's a lifestyle. And now, you can wear your recovery with pride. The Recovered Life Shop is live, packed with merch designed just for people in recovery. Whether it's a hoodie to keep you warm, a mug to start your day right, or a statement tee that lets the world know you're living your best recovered life. Need a little humor in your recovery? Grab the Resentment Some Assembly Required t-shirt. It's a classic. Ready to take massive action? Start your day with the Massive Action coffee mug. Or keep it simple and spiritual with the Chopwood Fetch Water Trucker hat. Every piece is designed to inspire, start conversations, and keep you connected to your recovery journey. And the best part? Every purchase supports great content like this and spreads the recovery message. So, go to recoveredlife.tv and click on the Shop tab now.
Step out of the shadows into the light. Find your tomorrow, start the fight. Recovered Life TV, see the change. Living your best life, it's within reach. Visit recoveredlife.tv today.
You're listening to The Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives.
And we're back. We're with guest therapist Kennedy McGurkin, and we're talking about borderline personality disorder today. I'm so glad to have her on. Before the break, we were really talking about, what is this? How do you recognize it? And now we're going to dive in to the solution here. So, Kennedy, we've been talking a lot about this. And how do you know if people are thinking, wow, maybe this is why I'm going in and out? Maybe this is why people say you're overreacting a lot, or there's a lot of drama here, and this keeps, and now you're trying to let it go, but you can't. Maybe it is BPD. How do you find out for sure if you have BPD? Like, what's the steps?
So they always tell us in grad school and in the field, do not self-diagnose. Please do not self-diagnose. If you believe that you have BPD, see a trained professional, see a therapist, see a psychiatrist. Make sure you are getting quality mental health care in order to be properly diagnosed, because once you have a label, you know what to do, right? If you don't have a label, you don't know. So if you are thinking, this is me, this describes my whole life, or, oh my gosh, this is my mom who I grew up with, or whatever it may be, go see a trained professional. Let them know your story. Let them know your symptoms you're experiencing, your goals. And the way to treat BPD is it's long-term. There's no quick fix. If you are really, really struggling, there is medication, but a pill will not fix the long-term behavioral change that needs to be done in therapy. Therapy is amazing for BPD. There is so much research behind talk therapy, but specifically DBT therapy that was designed to specifically help people struggling with BPD.
Yeah. And we're going to, we'll have you back, and we're going to do even more on that, because I think that DBT is amazing.
Yeah.
The process of that. And it's just, it's so helpful in getting, in really identifying these behavior patterns and being able to kind of step in and, really have some positive change in your life.
Right.
So I'm going to ask the magic question here. This thing with addiction, I hear this a lot, and people will come on our TikTok lives and they'll say, hey, I'm a borderline, and I'm trying to get sober, and I'm trying to work on my borderline, but I'm not going to really get sober because I'm not really ready. And, a lot of the comments, I'm like, it's hard to work on a mental health issue when you're trapped in addiction, because how much awareness can you have, especially if you're an alcoholic, not a problem drinker. If you're an alcoholic and you're constantly having the phenomenon of craving, constantly sucked into the process of addiction, right? That cycle of addiction. How do you really do that? Right? How do you really, so isn't really the first step is also looking at your addictions as well and saying, I have to stop that, because that's also messing with your feelings, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Alcohol, any kind of substance will heighten, right? That's what a lot of drugs do, is they heighten emotions and feelings. If you already have BPD and you're struggling with it, if you go on a bender and then you try and get clean and sober, you are going to feel those emotions even stronger than you already do. And that can cause a lot of distress. That can really cause a lot of self-harm ideations of, will I ever get out of this? Is it worth getting out of it? I can't handle this anymore, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, drugs and alcohol will 100% elevate the already, like, it's like coals to a fire. It'll ignite the fire that's already there if you have addiction on top of BPD, and it will just make those symptoms exaggerated even more.
Yeah, and I've seen that, and it's sad because we did an episode with a guy named Cecil, who is an amazing person, and he has suffered from schizophrenia
Mhm.
and addiction, and he's sober long term, like over 20 years. And
Wow.
Kennedy, one of the things we were talking about is that he had to let go of
Yeah.
some of the things that had learned with this old school AA group that he had,
Yep.
and that there were certain things that didn't quite fit, not the addiction part of it and the things to do with
Mhm.
that, but some of the thing about like seeking help, that character defects, some of the things like that
Totally.
were very confusing to him. And we talked about this a lot of times, that with co-occurring disorders, sometimes there's two paths. You're
Mhm.
covering both at this. You have a program, let's say for BPD, you
Yeah.
have a program for your addiction, and
Right.
maybe a community with both, right? Like
Yes.
you have to pursue a recovered life from BPD as well, it seems like.
Totally. Yeah, I think too, this is like a course of action. So let's say someone would come in my office, they're struggling with BPD and high addiction. They would come see me for regular therapy, but I would also get them into a specific alcohol and drug treatment program, inpatient, outpatient, partial. And then they would still see me weekly, right? Or 2 times a week, because a lot is happening. You're processing through a lot. When you admit to your addiction, you're admitting, right? And your gear is off. You're totally showing up as this raw, vulnerable person. That can cause a ton of grief work as well alongside of the addiction. Um, so yeah, I think that's just so important to make sure if you are struggling with an addiction, that you are seeking specific therapy for that by a trained professional. And then also you can do talk therapy too alongside of that of, hey, this came up in my group when I was talking about my addiction, and then I want to process it a little more here of why I find myself in this cycle all the time.
Yeah, what would you say the amount of people that come in that have borderline and
Mhm.
have addiction problem? It's a lot, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's
a
high.
good percentage of people have addictions.
Yeah, it's very high. Yeah. I would probably say 60%, maybe, just from my clinical experience, or they're recovering from an addiction that they are trying to be done with because they want to heal their spirit and their soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to end this here with the recovery path here, because I'm gonna tell you, I think BPD has a bigger stigma
Mhm.
than alcoholism
Totally.
and being a drug addict. I think when people hear the word borderline, that's it. Like for a lot,
Mhm.
I really honestly, because they've maybe had a family member that caused a lot of chaos that wasn't
Yeah.
how treated, right? There's a lot of drama that goes along with untreated BPD, I've noticed.
Totally.
There's a lot of emotional draining.
Mhm.
And is this, and I know a lot of people are thinking it's like, I can't do that. I'm already an alcoholic or an addict. And that's their own interpretation about what that means. It doesn't mean that to me, but a
Yeah.
lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm already this. I now have to have this label." Well, that's it. For me, there's no path of recovery now ever. I'm
Yeah.
always going to be, quote, broken. And I say no one is broken.
No.
I'm sorry. I don't permit that in the recovered life. No one is broken. Yeah, broken thinking, broken actions, but
Right.
you're not broken, right? Can we
No.
talk about this? Is this really possible to have an amazing life
Yeah.
and have
100%.
BPD?
Yeah,
Okay, how?
100%. Yeah. It's a lot of work. I'm not going to discredit that. It is a lot of heavy lifting. It is a lot. It's a lot. And the typical like range of recovering from it, it's varied. It's varied, but it all depends on the individual. So if you are willing to conquer this, if you want to be in therapy, if you want to work on that, the more open you are to it and the more you accept it, the better it will be for you to move through it. If you are struggling, if you are resisting, it's going to take a while. It takes a while, but you can recover from it and you can work through it and you can learn how to identify it and be like, "Oop, that's my BPD self showing up. Like, let's sit with them for a moment and then let's move through it." Because when you're able to recognize and identify, you're able to change. And I think that's the most beautiful part of therapy. So there's a high rate of recovery for BPD, and it just takes a lot of work. It's a lot easier said than done, but it can be done.
I love this. And I'm so glad that you said that, because I think there is already one of the things we're trying to do with Recovered Life is we're trying to stop this victim consciousness
Mm,
that, okay, well, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, this is it, I'm broken or
right.
whatever. This is the furthest from the truth. And,
Mhm.
I find that people that have recovered from an addiction and do the work and stay in the work, right? And people who also, on top of that, have had some sort of other mental health issue that they're dealing
Yeah,
with, or anxiety, depression,
totally.
bipolar, BPD, any of this, they tend to be the more self-aware people if
Mhm.
they do the work. And I've heard it, people that have BPD say, "Oh, this happened to me today, and I realized that this was BPD thinking.
Yeah,
This wasn't the true me," right? Just
exactly.
like they're doing with alcohol and drugs. It's like, yeah, it said to use, but I was looking at that. That's not really what I want to do. I'm just frustrated.
Right.
You know? And
Right.
and I love the fact that you say that there is healing that is possible for people, that this isn't a death sentence. If you
No,
have this, you can make it, you can make it out of this and have your best recovered life.
totally. Yeah.
So final thoughts here, Kennedy. If anybody's struggling with and they're like, "I'm afraid, I don't want it. This is scary."
That's okay.
What's your thoughts to them?
That's okay. Be scared and do it anyways. That's a mantra I say to myself. That's a mantra I always say to my clients is you can be scared and show up. That's why we're here, right? It's scarier to do it alone than to do it with a therapist who will walk beside you and just help you through the big scariness of it. Because the scariness of it is the unknown. As soon as you're able to recognize it and be like, oh my gosh, that is my BPD. That's not me. I can do this. It becomes a lot less scary. And it becomes a lot less scary when you remove stigma from the society that we have picked up along the way and you recognize BPD for what it is. And that is the most beautiful part of therapy is giving a little bit of the scariness to the therapist who can take it for you. So,
Love this. Love this. Thank you so much for coming on the show, guys. We are going to, two things I want to let you know. One, we're going to put links on how to get a hold of Kennedy there and
yeah.
contact her. And for Recovered Life Plus subscribers, if you are supporting the mission of Recovered Life, either on TikTok as a subscriber or on Recovered Life TV, we're going to be doing an after the show with her right now. So she's going to hold the line after the break, and you will have access to that as a Recovered Life Plus subscriber. So hold tight, because we're going to go even deeper in that conversation. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Kennedy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, if you like this episode, think about supporting us by becoming a Recovered Life Plus member. At Recovered Life TV, we're not just delivering premium recovery resources, we're empowering you with the knowledge and tools that make a real difference in the quality of your recovery. By subscribing, you gain access to ad-free content, expert insights, exclusive video and audio segments, special projects, plus so much more, all while supporting our mission to spread the recovery message far and wide. Whether you're seeking to deepen your understanding or stay updated on the latest addiction and mental health recovery trends, Recovered Life Plus is for you. Subscribe now and start living your best recovered life. Just go to recoveredlife.tv and become a Plus member today.